What is going on, everybody? I am back today to give you another list, another topic I want to discuss. I feel like recently in 2023, when the Iron Claw was released, that there were a ton of TikToks and YouTube videos talking about just how sad that movie was and how it was the saddest thing that people had ever seen. And so many people were emotionally moved by the movie. And I was thrilled to see videos like that because I feel like we live in a time where people are often afraid to express their emotions and they're afraid to show vulnerability when it comes to consuming media, whether that be music or movies or like a piece of art or something that moves you enough that you would cry. I don't understand why so many people fear showing emotions. I'm someone who throughout my entire life has been incredibly emotional. I've cried a lot during movies and music and art. I think that there's something really beautiful when a piece of art can move you to a point where you feel the need to show it. And I think that there's been a lot of art in this world that has impacted me in a way that I felt those really intense emotions. And so seeing people talk about the Iron Claw that way, which if you haven't seen the Iron Claw, it's brilliant, it's fantastically well directed, and it is incredibly moving. And I thought it would be interesting today to talk about some of the saddest movies that I've ever watched and some of the movies that have made me cry over the years, that have really emotionally impacted me in one way or another. And obviously I will never be able to talk about every single movie that has made me emotional over the years, or every single movie that depicts sadness or like a heavy emotional state. I've watched thousands of movies in my life. It's really difficult for me to narrow it down. So if you'd like to see a part 2 of this video, let me know in the comments. But today I'm going to talk about some of the saddest films that I have ever watched. Starting off strong, I'm going to talk about Lars von Trier's Dancer in the Dark. This may be one of the saddest movies that I've ever watched in my life, and also one of the most brilliantly performed movies I've seen. This is one of the few films in her career that Bjork acted in, and Bjork is phenomenal. And I know there was a lot of controversy about the way Lars von Trier treated her on set. I know she does not speak highly of him. Lars makes incredible art, but seems to be a very damaged person and does not make the correct decisions very frequently. But I will say, despite all that, this movie is brilliant and Bjork's performance is absolutely incredible, but it is one of the most depressing films I've ever watched. Bjork works this very physical job where she has to go into this factory every single day to make enough money for her and her son to live. Her and her son both have this like degenerative eye disease where they're both going to lose their eyesight, and she wants to make enough money to be able to get the surgery for her son so that he does not go blind. So she's going every day to work, but while she's going to work, she is progressively losing her own eyesight, which is making it more difficult for her to be able to do her job to make enough money for her son to get this surgery. While at the same time, Bjork's character is obsessed with musicals, and her whole thing is nothing bad can ever happen in a musical. And so throughout the film, we get these really incredible musical numbers that Bjork performs. The choreography in it, it's really interesting because this film was shot in the Dogma 95 style, so it's shot almost entirely handheld. A lot of people have a hard time watching this movie because they find it nauseating because of how the camera moves. And I think that there's something about the cinematography that accompanies the film, its film's mood and tone. And I really like how rough around the edges it is. I think it makes the story feel all that more realistic. And it's heartbreaking because the entire film is a mother showcasing her love for her son and everything that she would do to protect and care for her son. And the third act of this movie is pretty much like sticking a knife in you and turning it again and again and again. It's guttural, it's heartbreaking, it's beautiful. It's just one of the best movies I've ever seen. Bjork's performance is up there and one of my favorite performances of all time. If you've never seen this, even if you aren't a fan of musicals, watch this movie. It is phenomenal. Up next, I have to include Don Hertzfeldt's It's Such a Beautiful Day. I never knew knew a film about a stick figure man could make me cry so much, but here we are. It's Such a Beautiful Day tells us the story of Bill, a stick figure character, who we get glimpses into his life, and we see how his health is starting to fail, and he's depressed, and he is lonely. And we get this voiceover narration throughout the film, kind of telling us a little bit about Bill and his thought process and where he's at in life, and different vignettes and certain circumstances that he's in. This movie tackles themes of depression, anxiety, thoughts of death, existential dread, familial trauma. And what I love so much about it is using a stick figure and kind of giving you as an audience member a blank canvas to attach yourself onto this character makes the themes resonate that much more strongly. And it's something that I appreciate a lot about Dawn, is that this movie, the raw emotionality of it is some of the most intense I've ever seen in a film. And the thing's only like an hour and 12 minutes long. Like, it's really short. It's some of the most impactful cinema I've ever seen. There are moments in this, I cried more times in this movie than I could even begin to tell you. I think, as someone who's struggled with depression and anxiety most of my life and who's dealt with a lot of familial trauma, there is a lot of things in this movie that resonated really heavily with me, and that every time I think about it and every time I want to revisit it, there's something about the fact that even though it's a sad movie, it's a movie that provides me comfort, knowing that there's so many other people on this planet that have dealt with similar things, that have managed to overcome and to succeed. And despite these movies being sad, I think there's always some glimmer of hope amidst the sadness. And that's what I would say about It's Such a Beautiful Day. Despite the fact that the movie gets very dark and very depressing, there are moments that can lift you up, and there are moments that will make you feel good. And I just love this movie a lot. I've praised it a lot since I've watched it the first time. It's brilliant, but it's also incredibly sad. Up next is the Sean Baker film, The Florida Project. This is one of my favorite A24 films. This movie is very sad, but it's not sad through the entire runtime. There are moments of genuine joy and happiness. I think my favorite thing about Sean Baker as a filmmaker is the way that he is able to capture human emotion in such an authentic way, and just a human experience in a very authentic way. All of his films feel very documentary to me, despite the fact that they are actors and they're put in situations that he has written. There's something about the way that they perform and the way that they interact with their environment, the way that the actors deliver dialogue, that you just kind of lose yourself in it. And The Florida Project takes place outside of Disney, in the Orlando area, at a hotel where a lot of people living on the poverty line stay because they can't afford apartments and they can pay really cheap rent living in this hotel room. The only regulations that they have is at a specific period they have to move rooms, and it's about a young mother and her daughter living together there. And we're getting the film really through the perspective of the child and through the child's experience. And there are moments where this kid is hanging out with friends and just exploring and living life, and we're getting that genuine thrill of being a kid and just wanting to have fun and live your life. But we're also seeing the true horrors of what it's like to live on the poverty line, and what this mother is trying to do to take care of her kid, but she's also incredibly self-destructive, and she doesn't really know when to make the best decisions because she's had a bad hand dealt to her for so long. And I think it's the heartbreaking reality that so many people have to experience on a day-to-day basis. And Sean Baker captures it perfectly. The fact that it's set to the backdrop of Disney World, which is supposed to be the happiest place on earth, and there's these people living these existences that are so difficult just to get through the day-to-day right outside of this place, really makes it all the more difficult to watch. I love this movie. I think it's fantastic. Not enough people really talk about it in A24's catalog. I feel like there was a lot of buzz around it when it was first released, but it's one of those movies that I just wish more people would watch and more people would discuss. Sean Baker's one of those filmmakers that I don't think ever gets enough praise, and this is one of my favorite films in his catalog. Up next is the Gaspar Noé film Vortex. So I've only seen two of Gaspar Noé's films. I saw Climax, which I was not a big fan of, and then I watched Vortex, which I was a huge fan of. This movie is depressing with a capital D. This movie is about a husband and wife couple who the wife starting to deal with dementia, and she's slowly starting to lose who she is as a person. She can't remember where she goes half the time. She gets lost when she goes to just do day-to-day activities, and the film is shot split screen, and we get the husband's point of view on one side and the wife's point of view on the other side, and we watch them live their day-to-day lives. And it's really heartbreaking to see two people who have lived together for so long and that love each other and that have had so much experience together slowly start to lose who they are as people because of age. And I think that's the harsh reality that so many people that deal with dementia have to go through, is you start to lose you. And Gaspar Noé does a brilliant job at capturing what it feels like to go through that, and what it's like to experience it, and what is the correct way to approach living through that scenario. And it's heartbreaking. It's very difficult to watch in moments because you're just rooting for these people and you want the best for these characters, but you know there really is no positive end in sight. It's really hard to see a silver lining. And then we also get the perspective of their son, who doesn't have the best life himself and is raising a kid on his own, and isn't necessarily making the best decisions. And you can tell that he loves his parents, but he doesn't really know what to do in the situation either. And it makes it very complex, but I think that's the reality of the circumstances, that it is a complex situation to be in. It's a brilliant movie. I think more people need to see it. It's very hard to watch, but it is fantastic. Next is a recent film, and that is going to be the film After Sun from director Charlotte Wells. This movie, I feel like, is going to hit different people in different ways. As someone like me who has been through some pretty extreme familial trauma in my life, this movie really hit the nail on the head for me. It's not necessarily a sad watch through the entire film, and I want to make that apparent in some of these movies. A film's sadness, or the emotionality of a film, does not have to resonate through the entire runtime to really pack a hard-hitting emotional punch. Most of this film is a summer between an estranged father and his daughter, and the two of them spending a lot of time together, and the two of them having a lot of really fantastic, happy moments together. And they have these really long dialogue sequences with one another where it feels like two old friends catching up almost, and it's wild because it's a father and a daughter. Despite those beautiful moments, the film has a hard-hitting realization of, like, can this person actually be a dad? Do they have what it takes to continue to be a father? Or are they so lost in their own life that they don't really know how to take that on as a responsibility? And I think the way Charlotte Wells captures that is brilliant, because you really do get both perspectives. I think we spend enough time with both characters to understand their headspace and to understand their actions. And it's a very quiet, realistic film that captures this one summer between these two characters together in a way that feels very realistic. And I love that about this movie. It's one of those films that I recommend to everyone. It's not necessarily going to be for everyone, but I think it's amazing, and I think more people need to see it. Next up, I want to talk about the Abbas Kiarostami film Taste of Cherry. This movie is incredibly depressing, but it's not depressing the entire runtime. I feel like there are moments of hope, but essentially this film boils down to, it's about a character who's living in the Middle East, and he's driving around in his car, and he's trying to find someone to help him commit suicide. He's gotten to a point in his life where he just doesn't want to go on anymore. And it's these scenes of this character driving around in his car and having these really long conversations with people, and people's reaction when they find out what he wants to do. And I think what I love the most about this film is, mental health is being more talked about in our society today, but it's not necessarily even 100% where it needs to be. I don't think there's not a complete transparency when it comes to mental health and the importance of discussing mental health with people. And this movie never 100% gives us what the character's motivation is to why they want to end their life, but I don't think it matters. I think that Abbas Kiarostami does a brilliant job of telling you, like, the reason this person wants to end it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that they want to end it and they don't want to live anymore. And I think these conversations that the character has opens up the beauty of what life is reason, no matter how difficult life can get, or no matter how upsetting life can get, that there's a reason to move forward. There's always something. Our lives exist and we're thrown on this planet, and it's the luckiest thing in the world. The chances of you being born are so slim. And I think what's so brilliant about this film is the way that those conversations put the positives and the negatives out there and the difficulties of just being alive. And it's one of the most brilliant films I've ever seen. If you've never watched this movie, I recommend it to almost everyone. It's one of my favorite films of all time. So those are just some of the saddest films I've ever seen. What are some of the saddest films you've ever seen? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your lists. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.